In issue number 141 of the Fantastic Four, published in November 1973, Reed Richards has to use his antimatter weapon on his own son, who a nihilist has turned into a human atom bomb. It was a typical predicament for the Fantastic Four.
Hey everybody, this is Petey from Spin Rack, and today I'm doing a video on Franklin Richards, the son of Reed Richards and Sue Richards. They're somewhere in the back there, right? Ultimately, the MCU is saying that, well, the rumor mill is saying that Franklin's going to be a big part of the MCU, and that talking about how powerful he is. And I would kind of not want them to do that, because Franklin's early history from, I guess it's FF Annual 6 to about, I guess, in my opinion, I guess you could say it's like 222. We kind of became a mainstay in the FF comic book. For a while, he was kind of in the background, and I'm going to talk about why he went into the background for so many years until like 1980, where he became a regular in living in the Baxter building and stuff like that. Ultimately, I will start this video saying that they shouldn't have an all-powerful Franklin, because ultimately Franklin's best bits, which are not Franklin being more powerful than Galactus or the Celestials or the Beyonder or anything like that. What was the most interesting portion of Franklin's time in comics is actually in, I guess it'd be the latter, well, I guess not the latter part, I guess 2/3 of the period in the Byrne run, where he didn't have any powers for a while, and when he started becoming a member of Power Pack. Those are the periods where Franklin was actually kind of interesting and not just kind of a plot device or a victim. Now, ultimately, at some points in your story, Franklin, the kids are going to be a victim. That sort of thing can happen. But when you have something like the Fantastic Four, which was created so much new things, I sort of think it went a little too cliche in how they handled Franklin, and at the same time being something, kind of perceived as, what do they call it? They call it realistic. The realism kind of went out the door when they introduced Franklin. And this is even with the great Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So we're going to go through the history, and we're going to get to the period where we get to, which was the tattletale period of Franklin, where he was a part of Power Pack, where his powers were basically, you could see the future. And I think that was a good place for him, because he's totally not manageable as an all-powerful character, right? So let's do a quick thing, right? So here, FF Annual 6 is the first appearance of Franklin as a baby when he's first born. To give you a brief history, the FF kind of had this thing of comic book realism. It wasn't realistic, it just had realism. They had points where they'd lose money, they would break up, they would argue, stuff like that. And they were always trying to find something to do with Sue. So they gave her, when the people went in and complaining about her kind of being the fifth wheel, they pointed out how important she was to the story. They also gave her an additional power, which was the invisible force field. And then they had this long-term engagement between Reed and Sue, and they also had a love triangle where the Submariner came in and almost broke up this union between Sue and Reed. And so many things that were playing out in a great way. And by the Annual 4, Reed and Sue got married. And they had a comic book wedding where they had everyone fighting all the villains, ton of characters in it. And then I think it's over a year when Annual 5 comes, and I think this is somewhere after issue 55 or something like that. maybe later, somewhere around. They talk about there's a long-standing gag where they talk about trying to go on their honeymoon, and something keeps stopping them. The whole greatest period in comic books happened, and I think somewhere around issue 66, where I think somewhere around there, or somewhere where after they fight, who's that guy? They fight Ronan, which is like issue 62. Between issue 62 and issue 66, obviously they consummated they conceived the baby, and we don't find out about it until annual number 5. So that's a little more, I guess it's more than a year. So annual 5, we find out Sue's with child, and then for a couple of issues, they're together where becomes bad for a while, and Reed has to get Sue out of that. So then that plays out for almost I think pretty much a year, and then issue 6, annual 6 is where we have the Let There Be Life. And in this issue, there's also a subplot while she's pregnant that the cosmic radiation from Reed and Sue and the baby are now turning to this chain reaction that could kill Sue and the baby, or the baby could be some sort of it just could be terrible for them. So basically, they know in the negative zone there's some power that they can use trying to counteract this. So they go into there, they run into Annihilus, the first appearance of Annihilus also, and he has the cosmic rod. And Reed figures that the cosmic rod has the power to kind of quell this sort of energy that's in Sue during the pregnancy, I guess during this quickening time. So they ultimately get the cosmic rod, but they have no idea how to use it. Now the cosmic rod also is something that helps Annihilus with his immortality, so he has to get it back. He wants it back, and while the FF, like this scene here, the FF are about to float to their death, where matter meets antimatter, and Annihilus comes and makes them a deal that he'll show them how to siphon off some energy from the cosmic rod. And Reed also makes an additional deal saying, give us our jetpack so we can get out of the negative zone. And the team doesn't think Annihilus is going to work on it, he's going to cheat him, but basically they agree, they get the power packs, and next thing, the team is on their way out and they escape the negative zone, luckily. And they wind up in the waiting room, and Ben and Johnny are with Reed, the expected father, and there's nothing they can do, but hopefully the surgery and the energy they have can help out. And as they wait, the other person hears about his kid, and the next thing, celebration happens. Reed Richards is a father. We find out it's a boy, and we see the success. At that point, this is the late 60s. So I guess men still weren't in the delivery room, but Crystal, the Human Torch's girlfriend, had been a part of helping out Sue during her pregnancy. So she's been around, not fighting with the team, kind of just helping Sue out and being there for her while she has these issues. And we get to see the baby, and in classic Stan and Jack fashion, they have a great moment for your fans. And even though this was Reed having to take Sue out of the team a couple of times, we get this nice poignant moment between all of our favorites of the Fantastic Four with Crystal and their new supporting cast, the baby. But in my opinion, I think that Stan and Jack realized, like, wait a second, now we have to deal with Sue, who's going to be taking care of a baby, so she can't really fight with the team. And so if you look at the next issue is they write a replacement. Crystal finally becomes a member of the team. And this is issue 81. So issue 81, she shows that she's like really dynamic, as strong as the rest of the team. She's able to take out the wizard. So she's a good addition to the team. In my opinion, if you look at this issue, she might be more dynamic than Sue. But then in issue 82, it's like Stan and Jack realized, wait a second, we did it again. We really messed up. Now, Sue, we weren't planning on Sue to be out of the book. So for some reason, Crystal's like, I gotta go back to the Hidden Land. And they do a great story where they go to the Hidden Land and fight Maximus. But then Crystal doesn't really utilize her powers like she does here. She kind of goes to the background because, in my opinion, we don't see Sue through until '86, where they're fighting Doctor Doom in Latveria. They're fighting Doctor Doom. She saves them. She puts her force field up when they have no powers, but she still had powers, so she was able to save them. And then the thing says we should have never done this without her. So you can see that they're trying to let the fans know Sue's a big part of the team. And then her next story against the Mole Man, Reed is almost killed, and she goes all out to save and stop the Mole Man. So they're kind of trying to make Sue back. But if you at the same time, all these issues, and this is over a year's time, they don't name the baby yet. It's an ongoing subplot when they have downtime of saying, hey, what's the baby's name? Like, what's the baby's name? So this is issue 81 I have up here. It's not until, where is this? Issue 94, which is like a year later, where they finally named the baby. So issue 94, the 81 I showed you when the pregnancy happens, babies are already born. We have 94, well over a year, where the baby finally gets the name Franklin. And in true Stan and Jack form, they gave him a name connecting to a character, one of the first superhero characters, I guess, who died before, but it was a poignant death before, before Gwen Stacy, Franklin Storm passing after Sue and Johnny get him back. So he named Franklin, and of course, and as I said, in true Stan and Jack fashion, we get to the next page, and Ben, who's totally really not interested, and to show that Ben's obviously a part of the family, they gave the middle name after Benjamin. So he was Franklin Benjamin Richards, and you can see Ben connect with Franklin, and you see it almost brings a tear to Ben's eyes. So it's a very poignant moment. So both moments, even though they had some elements of comic book stuff of taking forever to figure out what the baby's name is, all these complications that were going on with Sue, and this high drama that was happening. When they finished it, they got the Stan and Jack pizzazz to it. But at the same time, in the same issue, they shuttle out the baby to Salem's Lot with Agatha Harkness. So we're just going to scan a little bit earlier after that. And here they go to Salem's Lot in Salem, New York. They put the baby up there. Before attack, they almost beat the Fantastic Four, but Agatha Harkness takes care of everything. So they basically show you that it's not going to be the standard plot of utilizing the baby as a pawn or hostage, but at the same time, the baby is taken out of the book. So it does show up again in there, but it's basically away from any danger. And we also show that Agatha Harkness can also scare the Thing, so he's in good hands. But that's the simple, long and short of it. So as we go forward, it's not till we get to this part where they finally decide what Franklin obviously has some powers. So he's been sidelined for a while, and then we have Jerry Conway on the book, and he did this issue which was high FF drama in the Marvel style, where the baby's glowing like an atomic bomb. This issue is also used in the Ice Storm. It kind of the symbolic glue to the story of saying this high drama of the FF matches the past of the 70s and dealing with Nixon and stuff like that. And kind of that high drama of America matches, and the family sort of dynamic matches this issue. So, and also, if you imagine, just a side note, from the Ice Storm, Ang Lee gets the Hulk, and Tobey Maguire gets Spider-Man, and regretfully, Christina Ricci isn't in any superhero movies. I think she started to work with Vincent Gallo for I think Route 66 and what's the other thing, but that's not related to the Fantastic Four. So in this issue, Annihilus is back, and since Annihilus, of course, is the one who was ultimately a party to save Franklin, he is the one. He lost energy. He's going to take that energy back from Franklin. Whatever he used to save him, he's going to now take power from Franklin. And as this happens, in true FF fashion, the baby actually, something gets turned on. And said, this is only going to end in tragedy. And when Reed sees this, he realizes that the baby is almost connected to the cosmos. This could be the most dangerous baby on the planet. So only one thing Reed Richards can do is to shut him down. It shuts down the sun, and the sun goes into the coma. Turns off the energy that was seemingly overloading like the cover, but as we go along, it leads to the end of the Fantastic Four. The team is upset that Reed shut down his son and basically their family, and they don't like the option that Reed chose, and it breaks up the FF, and everyone walks away from him. So this it's not really the best sort of plot. It's high drama, like the way Stan and Jack used to have it, but it's pushing a little more where Reed would do something, or he'd be in the lab and he'd get there too late, or he does something and do something wrong. It's trying to keep the angle of how Reed kind of make the mistake with Ben, but he kind of grew out of that. Whereas the mistake with Ben was kind of one thing, but they were kind of trying to it was turning kind of repeating what they had done in different ways, but at the same time, and this would lead Sue and Reed to be broken up, and slowly their friends would have to get them together. So this, at some point, they get back together, and they're going for another wedding. It's a wedding of Crystal and Quicksilver. In the months Johnny was away, she fell in love with someone else. But in my mind, this was only her first. Johnny, I think that one of her early boyfriends. So it's okay that she found someone else. Same with Johnny. Johnny only had, he had Dory Evans, I think, and then Crystal, maybe someone before that. But we had this story where Ultron is all powerful, Ultron 7. He's all powerful, and he's a giant, and he's got all of these classic heroes running, the Avengers and the FF running. There's nothing they can do. Remember, Franklin is knocked out. So this is the other thing, the problem I have with it. Well, Franklin is a victim, and then the next story, there's no one that can save the day. What happens? Franklin wakes up out of his coma. He wakes up out of his coma like a child. And from waking from that, he just lashes out, right? Like any child would, and destroys Ultron. And that is that's a quintessential Franklin story. Where Franklin either sees his parents hurt and he just takes out the villain with no problem. So it's a little quick. It's too quick to do, but Franklin falls in that. You can see it in The Incredibles. They kind of did it with Jack, where Jack at the end kind of saves the day. So he kind of falls in this kind of thing. But at the same time, even though I think Jerry Conway's still writing this, in true FF fashion, they still find a way to make this into a poignant moment where the son is alive, he's been turned back on, and everyone's feeling again. The family's united. And we see Franklin's hair's changed from brown to the more like Johnny and Sue. He's a blonde now. Now I think he has black hair, which is weird. I don't know if he's dyeing it. But then at some point, I think there's a story before this where he gets stolen. He becomes a victim again, stolen, goes to Salem's Lot. This is an annual. It kind of closes that off, but they go to Salem's Lot again, and ultimately him and Agatha Harkness. It's a gorgeous issue by George Perez and Franklin. take care of everyone, the Salem's Lot, Salem 7, and this, that, and the other. So this is around, I don't know if this is before issue 100. It might have been. But this closes off the all the stuff that's happening with Agatha's son and all that stuff. No, it doesn't actually close it off. The next story is. So Franklin is still staying with Agatha Harkness in the time, but at the same time now, once again, from the Salem's Lot characters, he gets possessed again. So he becomes a danger to the team. So it's kind of two stories you can do. And we don't, obviously he's a kid, so it's kind of hard to keep any kind of dynamics with him and adults, because obviously they'll just be caring for him. So we have Franklin and this whole story with Salem's Lot again. But this is like, I think it's over a year later where they deal with this. And this is closing off it, but it's important. Issue 223 gets to a point where we have Agatha Harkness decides that she has to figure out stuff in New Salem. I've been calling it Salem's Lot in New Salem. She has to figure this stuff out. And now the FF will be taking care of their kid on their own without their babysitter and protector. So even though it's kind of tougher to have a kid around, I think this was kind of a step in the direction by Doug Mention. All these stories are by classic creators and artists. This is Bill Sienkiewicz drawing it. And the next picture, even though this was from 222, the issue before that, I just wanted a good testament to kind of show you the FF taking care of their kid. They're taking care of their kid in the Baxter building. So then I think after this part, so it was good having him around. Oh no, so then this is the big one. This kind of set the first thing of showing Franklin as an adult. This is Days of the Future Past. It's a classic X-Men story. The Sentinels have killed everybody, and at the same time, there's a small group of X-Men left. Wolverine is running around, but he's been hiding from the Sentinels. They can't keep him in a cage, so he's been running around doing stuff with the Canadian Resistance. And here we have Kitty Pryde on the cover. And we get to see some of the X-Men that are left. We see some of the regulars, which are Kitty Pryde, Storm, and Colossus, and it's supposed to be an alternate world. We don't know that it's alternate, but Magneto is also here as the leader of the X-Men, kind of the Professor Xavier. It's supposed to be kind of, I think, a kind of a surprise, but Claremont put the Magneto up there already, so there's no surprise in it. But there's two people in the background, and the people in the background is Franklin and Rachel. Franklin is the adult Franklin. So for me, I was just like, this set all of the X-Men stuff, because I was a huge X-Men fan, and it set me into, oh my gosh, Franklin's gonna be a student gonna be like Kitty. He's gonna be a student soon. At some point, he's gonna go to Xavier School of Gifted Youngsters, and he's going to become an X-Men. So it was like, I don't care about the Fantastic Four, even though I wanted to, at that point, I was trying to get back into it, but it wasn't like the cartoon for me. So I was like, yes, Franklin's going to be an X-Men. So now, do I have another picture? So, but Byrne was cagey. Since Byrne was heavy in the plot, he didn't want to reveal what Franklin's power was. So it kind of shows you that Franklin was a tech. He has some technical abilities like his father. So he makes this jammer, something that's going to jam the inhibitor. And the story, basically, they send Kitty Pryde's mind back in time to a time where she didn't have any mental blocks, so she could save the day. And at the same time, we get to, as the X-Men are escaping, we see Franklin get killed. So Byrne really didn't want to get into what Franklin's adult power was or how he got to this part. And I should have one of those. There was a drawing that Byrne did of the Thing trying to protect Franklin from Sentinels. But you see Franklin get killed, and it's a tough one. But in my mind, he still was going to be an X-Men. So I was like, yes. He's going to be X-Men at some point. So as we go along, Byrne left the X-Men and he started doing the Fantastic Four. And of course, Byrne wasn't the idea of having Franklin he wasn't too keen on it initially, but as he worked with him, he was like started to enjoy working with Franklin. So Franklin is a mainstay in the book. He had the 4.5 shirt from time to time, but Byrne was setting up the plot. Oh, so this is before that. So then, yeah. So when they get captured by Doctor Doom, he's there. He's kind of a mainstay in the book, and they also, while Byrne was setting up Franklin, he has this robot that's like Herbie that monitors Franklin's powers, because Franklin kind of uses his powers from time to time. So I think I'm going to show you a scene before this, but it's going to set up a subplot. And we see here when the regular cliche of the FF is that when they get hurt and there's nothing they can do, they're knocked out, Franklin gets upset and cries and he lashes out, just like I showed you with Ultron. So Byrne, not changing that sort of thing, is going to give you that. He gives you that moment. He takes out this creature, lashes out with his powers. And I think we have another scene where Franklin's playing with a toy and it flies off, and we find out that Franklin uses powers to make it fly. So we slowly get this development of his powers, the same way we used to see it. But then Byrne has this moment where he's trying to do the Rubik's Cube, and he uses his immense powers to fix the cube. And then the robot sees the power fluctuate, and then he hears someone grow up, and we see the robot explode. So we're going to get to this next issue. We're going to go through the full issue as much as we can, which is Childhood End. It says, the invisible girl fights alone for the life of her son. So she's seemingly in trouble. And in this issue, she basically is doing this TV show with a Barbara Walters type. And the Barbara Walters type sees her as not kind of a independent woman, kind of the shrinking violet of the team. She kind of points out, Sue's trying to point out stuff she's kind of did, but she's not going with it. She's kind of grilling her. And while this is going on, the Fantastic Four Flare is calling Sue for help. And the people, the workers at the TV show are kind of like, we can't say anything. We don't want to interrupt her and get in any trouble, get fired. So they don't tell Sue. So basically, she goes home. She doesn't know her family is in danger. When she gets home, she sees the FF beat up, Reed and Sue beat up, which is a common thing that happened in the FF, where the FF are kind of beat up by this overly powerful person, or they could beat up by a fake Iron Man. That's just a motif or convention of the FF. And we have this creature who kind of looks like what we'd see in the Shroud of Turin. And Byrne's trying to play up that sort of aspect to this character. And he's saying, you gotta answer this question. He says, I don't even know what the question you're talking about. And then he realized, even though Sue's invisible, that someone's there. And he realized she must have the answer. And then she tries to stop him, and he turns it into some sort of, looks like a religious tunic. And then she tries to use a force field, and he's able to counteract that pretty quickly. So if you haven't seen this, and I think, what was it, my brother had this book. So, and I was reading, I think I read this probably 3 or 4 million times. And this is where I was like, I'm gonna collect this book forever. Like, because my brother had it. I had issue 238 and 243. And when my brother came home with this one, and I think my friend Dennis had 241, it was like, I have to get all of these FF issues. Right? I don't even know if I knew Byrne by name, but I knew him by artist. So at this point, I was just like bowled over. I think I fell pretty hard for his Sue in 238. So I was glad to see it's an issue with Sue. But when we get to this part here, Sue realized not only have her teammates been beat up, something's going on with Franklin. the robot's destroyed, and the room is a mess. And then this guy's come in here. She doesn't know what was done to her son. So she's basically run. But at the time, the TV people are like, hey, something's going on there. And they're like, oh, we're going to see. The woman is like, we're going to go see the Invisible Girl fail. You're going to see her coming up short again. And they look up and we see Sue. Now, Sue early on has been, I think around in the 70s, has been shuttled out of the Baxter building by, I think, the fake Reed, the brute, that knocked out the building. But Byrne kind of shows you that Sue could figure a way to survive it. So she's fallen out. This is a cool way to show you she could kind of save herself in a situation where she's knocked out of a building. So it's pretty cool. And usage of her power. And while the news reporter, they think she's running, and he tells her to get everyone else to get away, and the person tells him to stop. And he finally asks the question out, like a kid at some point just lashing out at first. This person finally asks what the question is. Like, I don't know. And she looks into his eyes and realizes, and it's like, whoa. And then Franklin realized, oh, that is the answer. And he's like, he realized he's incomplete. He's an adult, but he doesn't know how to react. And then it's like you have to put the kid's voice into this adult body, which would be kind of fun, but he has an adult voice. So that's why they also didn't know him. So then they get to what actually happened when he changed the Rubik's Cube, and he heard the line. That usage of the power just also connected with him kind of doing something else. And his powers went out of whack. When the team is back up, they realize, she tells them this is his son, and they realize it's Franklin. Now Reed, looking at the situation, figures it out pretty much very quickly. He's just like, wait a second, this transformation, he's like, it's probably gonna create some other problems. He's like, growing up that old, he could still be aging. And then he said, we gotta figure a way to revert you back. And he's like, he said, I know it was to be done, but he said, one thing I can do, he said, with my power, I can do anything. But first, and he turns over and he looks at the thing. And this, as a kid, was a big moment where I was just like, it's all on the same page. I was like, oh my God, it's finally going to happen. It's finally going to cure the thing. And he reaches over to the thing, and the thing does his usual protests. And then he's like, you resist. And he reaches in Ben's mind and he figures out what he's going to do. And then he starts glowing to do something, well, to cure himself and cure the thing. And he actually puts the thing back to the way he was when, I guess, kind of when he first met him. So Ben turns back to the thing. The only difference is he doesn't have the same unibrow. Byrne kind of kept it how he has the oatmeal one. Like, there's a period with the thing, I think it's around 13 to 20. I've talked about it a bunch of times, where he didn't have a unibrow. He just had like an eyebrow, like one sort of thing like this that came from the head. People call it a mushroom head, but it was something Kirby designed. So Byrne kind of went back to that, and he still had the kind of arm muscles, but there's a period where Ben had chest muscles, but Kirby's never had chest muscles. He did have arm and leg, not fully leg muscles, but kind of like some sort of muscle control. But Kirby never gave him with like the sinew in the thing's arm or nothing like that. I think that came later with Gil Kane and who's the other person, Rick Buckler. And this just reveals that Thing has developed some blocks, which is set up from issue, I think it's issue 8 and issue 78, that he has a big hang up with Alicia. It's something that's set up in the early run. After it, the writers like Stan and Roy Thomas and the other people have made it more like it's kind of Ben's hang up. It's not Alicia's thing, but the way, at least in my mind, it would be Kirby, because Kirby did issue 78 and 6. He kept in mind that Alicia is not with thing. She's not with Ben Grimm. She likes the thing as a comfort, but she's not with Ben Grimm. So he's turned back. And one of the things that we don't note, when we saw, I think, I don't have the picture up with Gladiator for them, is that this is the second time we reveal that Franklin cannot connect with his powers. So she comes to surprise him, but he usually, with his powers, can tell that she's there. But now he's a normal child. And this sort of says she realized maybe she shouldn't be in this building because they get attacked all the time. And like this time is no different. In this whole arc where they're fighting a nihilist, the FF go into the negative zone to do research. They leave Franklin with Alicia, who's a very capable, but not capable when the nihilist comes. He doesn't have his cosmic rod, and he realizes that Franklin doesn't have his powers, his cosmic powers, and he tortures him just like he tortured Alicia. So nihilist is just the worst thing imaginable. Now, as I said, Franklin is at times can be a victim and/or now Byrne is removed, him being the plot device to close the story. So this time it's kind of solidifying that Franklin could be in danger. So we finally have to worry about Franklin again, because we didn't really have to worry about him when he had his cosmic powers. So I think as we're going on, we start to worry about these characters, and I don't think some characters we don't worry about. And Franklin one we didn't used to, so we can do a story where Franklin, of course, is going through the mill, and they have to take him to the hospital, and it leads to where Byrne is able to do, like Stan and Jack, this poignant moment where we see that Franklin survived, and Reed and Sue have to figure how are they gonna take care of a child in with the fact that they need to save the universe almost every other day. So it leads to the FF kind of moving to Connecticut so Franklin can have a regular life instead of the hustle and bustle of characters constantly attacking the FF building. And we see this has been some great moments in the Byrne run where Franklin was just normal. Sue's pregnant, she's hanging out with him. There's a portion after he just has some better moments with Franklin where we get to see his personality rather than the two basic things of either being a victim or a person who saves the day as a kid just lashing out type of deal. So, and we get to see while Sue, this is after she had her miscarriage, he has another moment here where he just gets to interact with his mother. It gets to see more of his personality. He likes the fact he likes the She-Hulk. He wants the She-Hulk to stay after when Ben comes back. So we just get to see Franklin have a regular day-to-day type of stuff. To just be there with his mother and just do normal kid stuff. While Sue's going through things, she's having these moments where Franklin's coming to comfort her and be there for her and just be normal. Like having these moments which really feel normal. And that's kind of the thing of the Byrne run, was kind of get those kind of not realistic, but just realism, just having some moments. Because Byrne obviously is high adventure type of writer, but he kind of grounds his stuff. Now, while I think it was issue 257, where they set up that the FF were going to Connecticut, this is well over a year of them having a regular life. We have a party this time where Franklin's in the neighborhood, they meet the neighbors, but someone realizes that Reed and Sue have these powers and they don't know. This woman's kind of backwards, so she thinks they're witches, and she calls this person of the occult to deal with them. So we're gonna get now. You imagine Franklin lost his powers in issue 245. So at this point, we the readers don't think about his powers. We think of him as kind of a regular kid that could get killed in any situation. And this is a poignant point where she's going to be in danger. But at the same time, there's another side part here. I need to pull it back. So in this portion of the story, we see Franklin is talking about a dream of a skinny lady that tried to hurt the FF, and then a big red man comes, and she doesn't think about it. But then he's like, maybe this is some sort of manifestation of his powers coming back, and saying those psychic dampers, it could mean disaster. So we get to see this nice moment, but at the same time, as normal, the FF get accosted by this woman who has some powers that they don't know what they have yet to deal with. So she fells them with ease, and she doesn't believe that they're the Fantastic Four. Because while she's trying to take them out, she's having no problem hurting them. So she knows how great the FF are, so these have to be phonies. And they take Sue down to hell, and they tear apart Reed's arm. And at the same time all this hustle and bustle happens, Franklin is also injured. And we see something happen with his blood when he gets injured. So as we go along with the with the child being injured, that since she's been working with the dark forces, a child being injured leads to Mephisto being able to appear. And this is some of this woman of the cult. She actually didn't realize that she let loose all these forces and trying to stop the FF, even though she didn't know. And this is kind of a story that's similar to something you could get out of Stan and Jack, where they were doing such a multi-genre thing. Byrne kind of goes back to that, where you could do kind of any story with the FF. So we get now the FF in hell. So we get to see Mephisto just do anything to them, just terrible things to the FF. And ultimately, I kind of got these out of order, but Doctor Strange comes and he realizes that Franklin is being hidden. And he's in a dreamless sleep for some reason. It's like, so he's not understanding why he'd be hidden like this. And at the same time, I think the way the issue goes, he comes and what's the name's more stronger than he appears. But when what's the name finds Franklin, Mephisto says, get away from him. And Doctor Strange kind of like, I don't know why he's protecting the boy. And Reed already realizes that. He said, Mephisto was afraid of Franklin. It's a great face. And to see Reed is kind of in fear, but he's just surprised because they've been going through so much. And realizes like, hey, thinking that maybe his mutant powers is what keeping him, but he realizes, wait a second, just like their bodies up here, their spirits are down there. So this might be his powers might be free to be of use, spirit self. So Doctor Strange frees Franklin. He doesn't understand why Reed would ask that, but he goes along with it. He trusts him. Sue is like, no, there's nothing he can do. He looks so vulnerable. And then Reed's like, nope, nothing we can do. So we don't know this is going to happen, but this is a perfect opportunity for it to work because it's a perfect storm for his powers to actually work, because we've got a setup where his body is up there, so where his spirit has no protection, because they still had their powers. They showed you that Reed could stretch, and showed you that there's nothing invisible for Sue to do, but that showed you that he still had his powers. So Franklin must have his powers, and since he already knows that Mephisto is the big red man who destroyed their house, he of course lashes out like Franklin. So it was a perfect way to kind of bring back Franklin and using his powers for at least a moment. And he hurts Mephisto, but Mephisto for some reason grows weaker. And I think it also connects to the fact that a child was hurt, the innocent was hurt. So there were some rules to it. And at the same time, Franklin gets rid of Mephisto, not for long, but for a while. And the FF will return, and she informs them that they're not witches, they're the FF. And we get another moment where we get a nice moment with Franklin and Sue, and obviously Mephisto can't be dead for long. So this is a cool part, but at the same time, it leads into what Byrne was planning for Franklin's real power. That he has these dreams, and these dreams kind of are close to reality. They are real, but sometimes it's interpreted by a kid. And realize he said, mommy killed you. Let's work into the Malice storyline, where he realized he already seen what happened, and he assumes that his mother killed his father, which is not exactly how it happened. But it develops that Franklin has these precognitive powers. And here's another key issue. We're not going to go through the whole issue, just the part, because I got to read the story where they decided that Franklin was going to be in Power Pack, so give him some young friends to play with. So Byrne, I guess, was agreeable. And Franklin has another dream. And this dream where he's interacting within it, and he's able to do more in this dream. This is going to lead to his powers. It's going to lead to his powers in his dream self. Now, since his mind is still has the blocks, his dreams are only that they're loosened. So they loosen just a little, so when he dreams, he can see the future, but he can't utilize his powers. He can only, the only byproduct of him sleeping is that he gets to see the future, and he can interact with the future. Not necessarily change it, but he can just interact with the future. And he can also interact when he falls asleep with the present. So he doesn't really deal with the future that much, but he kind of, in the same way when he dreams, he can stay in the present. So kind of putting his body like an astral form. So this is kind of a manifestation of that. So he's fighting these snarks from Power Pack that he's never met before. Doesn't have any power to do anything about it. But he seems to get saved by what seems to be kids, and he finds one of these pony type characters, and he helps them out, and he sees some kids like him, but they're superheroes. And the leader of the team wants to help Franklin, but Franklin, of course, wakes up and he wants to tell his parents, but this leads to Power Pack. Now, I've got this out of order too, because he's already got his costume, which he shouldn't have already, so I've got it out of order. But this here is, if you're actually, and went all this way to get to here, if you're actually a fan of Franklin, these are the stories you need to read if you are actually a fan. If you're a fan of him having a Galactus, which is not any sort of characterization part of a story, then you get all the other stuff. But this is actually Franklin interacting as a kid with other kids, with the Power Pack kids, mainly Katie, but he's mainstay of the team. So Franklin had that dream, so he's deciding that they're going to go out. They're going to go out to the park and whatnot. And he's already had the dream about Power Pack. He goes out with Jarvis, who is his new babysitter while he's in the Avengers Mansion. He puts on his FF thing, but he said, "Hey, I gotta have a secret identity." So he puts a jacket over his 4.5. And when he goes to the park, he sees the Power Pack kids, and they're already getting into something. So he wants to rush over and meet them. And he rushes over to meet them. They connect. They just think of him as a regular kid. He said, but that's the kid that they ran into in the dream, and he's helping the pony type of character. But the pony and Franklin have to stay in the closet while they talk to their parents. And side note, the parents are Walt and Louise Simonson, if you didn't know that already. So while they're in there, Franklin has, and this is the thing, I think these moments are so poignant that Chris Claremont did some Franklin stuff in the Fantastic Four versus the X-Men. He had the poignant moments between Franklin and Kitty Pryde. So he kept her for, she basically wanted to end it because she was losing her body, and Franklin kind of kept her there, and they got to do some really nice sort of scenes. And Franklin's there for this character, so we get to see Franklin's heart and his personality. And the kids come back with some food, and they realize it's Franklin Richards, and he's a part of the Fantastic Four. And Katie's not really with it, who's a part of the team. Katie and him have this kind of push-pull type of relationship, and we see it here where they're near the Statue of Liberty and they're just hanging out. They're superheroes, and he's kind of the son of Reed Richards. And you see her pinch him, and then he kind of finally starts pushing back against Katie. And I think Katie is in a couple of Wolverine stories, but I think this kind of works a little better because we get to see her crabbiness. And Franklin is still at times struggling that his parents are around, he kind of misses them. And they decide, but he's such a help, we're going to make you a part of the team. And Katie names him Tattletale, and he likes the name, and they have a kid's moment. So these things are priceless. So if you're doing a Franklin, it's not fun to just do. If you want the ultimate power fantasy of having a kid who's powerful enough, more powerful than the Celestials, the Beyonder, and Galactus, then that's a different thing for you. But if you want Franklin, this is where they really more like Byrne had a lot of moments, but having him be able to interact with kids, we got to see a ton of more Franklin moments. And we get to see, then of course, the kids bring him back to the Avengers Mansion, and Jarvis thought he lost them, and he's so happy. So we get this nice moment here too. So it's some priceless stuff. And then the Power Pack kids on this other planet. The Power Pack kids on another planet, and they have this ship that's kind of their helper, what they fly in to go fight the galaxies and all this stuff. So they need Franklin to come help them. So he puts his costume on, and he wants to leave a note for his parents. So in description, it makes sense, but then when we see what he left, because he's only 4 years old, it's just a drawing. So it looked like very important stuff. I'm sorry, y'all. I think and John Bogdanove, you saw June Bringden do such some of these other artists like John Bogdanove. The picture you see here is June Brigham doing Tattletale Franklin. This image I have up here is John Bogdanove. I think who else does great kids? Arthur Adams, Brett Belvins. There's some artists that do really great kids, and some of the best, the hottest artists, they might struggle with kids, whereas Byrne or George Perez, or I think Walter Simonson is kind of stylized kids. But these like June Brigham and John Bogdanove, they really do great kids. So whereas my favorites, they kind of excel in the action type of thing. But like all of these moments and reactions, the personality, or they say the acting is really powerful. And we see Franklin utilizes, first time he utilizes his powers to sleep for a little while, and then comes a dream self. So he's safe from any sort of danger while all these gunfights are happening. He's a ghost, so he can't get hurt. So there's a fail-safe to save Franklin, so he doesn't have to worry. He'll always be in an action scene and not get hurt because he's always in the dream self most of the time. And then at the same time, we see Franklin almost has missed his parents, and he wants to leave with this pony type character. But the pony's father saying, we gotta go, we can't take him, and his family's gonna miss him. And we see Franklin have this moment, like there's so much emotion. It's like if you're sitting around there waiting for him to kick over a planet, it's just a waste of time. Like look at the storytelling here, him crying and that sort of thing. And he goes back, and we also we get to hear, and there's still his parents. I think the parents out in space, the FF might be looking for Franklin. So Franklin is with the powers. So he is crying, but the family is there for him, and I said they're welcome easy. He says he's gonna make lentil soup, and the kids hate it. And you see, and he said that's his favorite. So we get to see some real moments of character, and that's what I think is always better, to sort of get the character, and then you can do your stuff. I think Byrne developed the character, then you can put the character in peril. because at some point they're going to be in peril, but you want to do some sort of character stuff so it means something when you get to that point. So we see Franklin trying to help Jarvis, and he's not much of a help because he's a kid. And then the powers come and they let Franklin go out. And of course, they're going to go on another superhero adventure. So anytime you see stories where the New Mutants got to stay in the house, the cool part of the kids' stories is having them do a lot of stuff. So this is a story where they reveal to their parents that they're superheroes. And then at the same time, here are their superhero friends. So we got Franklin Richards, we got who's a Cloak and Dagger, and then these pony type characters. And the family, like, oh well, they finally, because the family in these stories, the kids are always gone, they're always heartbroken, and then they get very happy when the kids come back. But it's like a constant struggle for the parents. And we see, I think the order is kind of mixed up. We see Franklin out, and this is where his family finds out that he's gone, that he's left with that, and they get Franklin's note. And I think they go out in space while Franklin's already back home. But they kind of deal with some of the stuff that's going on out of space. But I thought that was a great moment of this thing. And we see Reed kind of figure out what his son is drawn, kind of figures out from the little information he has. And he says this might be compatible with some other information. And he figures that out, and they're off in space. Well, Franklin, I think, it already came back and he's with the powers or something like that. Where they see them out in space again. Oh yeah, so they're out in space, and at some point when they come back home, Fantastic Four get there and they solve all of the strife between the lizard cat, the Snarks, and those pony type characters. So then we're here. I think it's John Bogdanove writing this in this period. But we have a master mole, and obviously Franklin's a mutant, so he's trying to take out the 12. This might be a Louise Simonson story. Let's see what happens when we get to the next page. So you just get some great drawings right here. So as soon as Byrne was gone, ultimately Franklin went back to being, Doom is utilizing Franklin's powers. This is Steve Englehart, so it's kind of turning him back to a plot device where you could do character. You can't really do character stuff when you unleash Franklin's powers. You can do a lot of character stuff with the Power Pack, even though it didn't last till this is a little before it was canceled. This is by Tom Morgan, and but it was a fun series. So now at this point, when Walter Simonson is doing the Fantastic Four, he only wrote this issue. He kind of kept Franklin regular. Franklin meets up with the Power Pack kids. He is just a kid. When Reed Richards goes to the Senate, he mainly goes to the Senate because they want to do the Mutant Registration Act, and Reed is like, no way, especially because my son is a mutant, but it's my son, and I already know mutants, and there's no reason why. So the whole FF come in to help in the name of mutants and strike down Congress and that sort of thing. So Simonson had done some just fun stories where Franklin's a kid. He does do a very poignant story where Franklin runs into the ghost of Marley in this Christmas story. It's a really good story. I think if we ever get to do some more Christmas stories, I'll do that one. But it's a Franklin story that Walter Simonson did, where Franklin sees a ghost, and then next thing he finds a way to get that ghost released, right? But this is going into the X-Men stuff, because I think Chris Claremont also did Past to the Future Days, which was a throwback to Days of the Future Past. So they finally decided to cash in on Days of the Future Past, because they've been hinting on it, was the Days of the Future Present, that a character from the Days of the Future Past would come back and attack the present day. But at the same time, the character that would come through would be Franklin. So Franklin would come in and start reversing stuff because he's all powerful at that point, and he's an adult. He just turned things back the way he knew it. So I don't really have too many issues. I just got these covers because it kind of deals with this Ahab character who's chasing Franklin, comes in and decides he wants to make other mutants hounds also. So And here we get our image from Rob Liefeld and Scott of Franklin in the period of the Days of Future Past. And this is a New Mutant issue, but it also shows Franklin at his time as a New Mutant. So it plays up to all the stuff as a kid I would have loved as far as him becoming a thing. It's not as, I don't necessarily need it, but it's an okay story. I think Will Simonson's issue is good. The X Factor and the New Mutants are good. This one is really good too. This one's kind of poignant. We hear Rachel, who's had one pseudo love interest early when she comes back to present day. And then after that, she's kind of pantsuit person until she gets to the Excalibur period, where she kind of realizes that she's the hottest thing on Earth. So she dresses up. She has her costume that they finally decided was going to be a hound costume, and it kind of works for this story. So it connects her to Ahab, who was supposedly made her into a hound. We find out how she became a hound, but at the same time, we have an adult Franklin, and we have a baby, a 6-year-old Tattletale, a 5-year-old Tattletale, and whatever's going on with Franklin is hurting Rachel, and it's hurting a regular Franklin. And it all comes to when I showed you the death of Franklin. He still was able to, his powers are so immense, he was still able to send out his dream self when he died. And this is what happened. He sends himself into the past and he causes all this havoc. So it's a good sort of ending to the story. Instead of just seeming like a cash cow, they had a good bit, and it's some of the best stuff by Chris Claremont. He kind of brought this one home for me. It's decent art by Arthur Adams, but some of the printing is muddy. Kind of a ton of characters at the same time. FF, X Factor, New Mutants, X-Men. So there's a lot of characters in here, so it's tough to kind of fit it all in there. Young Storm is kind of bossy because she's obviously a young person in an adult body, but it's done really well, this end of this tale. So it deals with Cyclops finding out that Rachel is his daughter, Jean finding out that this is supposed to be her daughter, and she's like, I'm locked into all this Phoenix stuff and I don't like it. So we are a good ways in. So that was a decent story, but then with Walter Simonson gone, the FF went to a new wave period with Tom DeFalco and Paul Ryan and had some nice art, but it was getting kind of into a cliche period. So they were doing stuff where we're going to release Franklin's powers again. So as we go along, we read this guy, Oculus, right? Classic kind of name, powerful, but he winds up releasing Franklin's powers again, right? And this story resolves, and but the hint of his powers being back, but we have Reed's father come in, and he's here to protect Franklin. So we get to see the Days of Future Past, and Tom DeFalco kind of changes what happens, where there's an element of surprise, where Franklin dies, and they kind of left it where Franklin kind of destroys one and then he gets killed. But Reed's father kind of looks and figures that his grandson is going to die, so he wants to come and find out. Reed's father is a pacifist, so they like the idea, I guess, that he was a warlord, so they wanted to try to play with that. So instead of being a pacifist, he's decided that he's going to save his son from any history. So it seems to be, but you have to imagine everybody dies. But his thing is like, nope, I'm going to save my grandson. And his grandson is not with it. So, of course, Franklin has his powers, and he's able to, and he's just saying Franklin has his powers to deal with a psychic blast. But that's not what Franklin's power was to just shut you down. Like, you couldn't do anything to stop him, and somehow describe it as his power is just to destroy everything. So they kind of made it gray so he could do what he wants. So he's like, I'm going to take the kid and escape, go into the future. Then you see him come back immediately, which I guess is supposed to be a cool moment. But it's actually Franklin. So it's like, oh wow, what's the easiest way of getting rid of a kid? Making them an adult. So we just lose the whole kid aspect and having to deal with the kid and that sort of thing. So in my mind, it's kind of like, and so many people that are kids turn into adults, X-Men wise, it's just kind of not my thing at all. So this is like, oh my goodness, this like storyline for over 2 years, like maybe 2 or 3 years, where he's an adult, and then towards the end of their run, they need to set up Franklin being back. And so Franklin, the boy, comes back, but at the same time, he's in this outfit that's way oversized for him. So it's just like kind of weird. But I was trying to have the same moment that I showed you, but this is like issue 412. So it's almost like 30 issues. It's almost like 3 years while he's an adult. And then they have this moment where he's back, but it leads into this is a character called Onslaught. And Onslaught will steal Franklin. So we got to take Franklin away from this because Heroes Reborn is happening. So the Marvel people in the office decided we're going to work this into the story where we're going to remove the regular heroes from it. So the Fantastic Four is out, and the rest of and all of their friends are going to go out and try to save Franklin and stop Onslaught. And if they fail, humanity dies, and while the X-Men characters are trying to fight against Onslaught, the regular heroes come out of nowhere to save the day. And they realize Onslaught is something connected to, let's pull it back. Onslaught has something, there's some sort of rift. Onslaught has it where the X-Men can't actually sacrifice themselves to stop the rift. But the humanoid characters, the humans that don't have a mutant gene within them from birth, can actually go through it. So with Franklin's help, they go through it, and seemingly they sacrifice themselves. Franklin freezes them. He puts them into this separate time. And this is I don't know who came up with this, but it's not really the best idea. Kind of utilizing, like using him as a plot device. So basically, they seem like we lose all the heroes, but at the same time, the heroes, Franklin does that, and he seemingly says he saves them. He said they'll always be with us in your heart. But in actuality, we know it's more than that. We know that they're going to be reborn somewhere else with the Image guys. And then after a year or so, Franklin is the one to try to bring them back. But we realize this whole thing has been a cosmic thing of two worlds, and one has to die, and one can live, but Franklin wants his parents back. So he's with this woman. This woman's actually a celestial, but she's in human form, which we haven't seen before. So you see her, she's a giant now, but at some point she's going to be Franklin's size. And Franklin goes to the Heroes Reborn world and says he's got to get rid of one of these worlds and save them. So, and we see the Celestial, and that whole story. They come back. Scott Lobdell, he did some nice kind of Franklin moments, like cute moments. And then we had Chris Claremont, who creates Marvel Girl, who's in the Fantastic Four, who's the daughter of seemingly Dr. Doom and Sue. She's named after Doom's girlfriend, Valeria. So I wasn't really too keen on that. So we had Chris Claremont and Scott Lobdell, Chris Claremont. We had Pacheco, Carlos Pacheco, rest in peace, with Marin, who's a co-writer. And then we had Jeff Loeb, who's doing scripts, since they were Spanish from Spain, and Jeff Loeb was coming in to give it more kind of Marvel-like dialogue. And they fight this character called Abraxas. Abraxas kind of changes realities, and the Pacheco run was going pretty well, better than the Chris Claremont one. But I guess for some reason he wanted he goes into his storyline, he decides he's going to fix something in Marvel. And the fixes should never be that clear. So it should feel like a consequence of the story. But when Reed is out, Franklin realized that he is going to make everything right. And Roma sort of helped him, and he's going to do something with Val. And we realize that he saved the Heroes Reborn people. Pacheco has decided that he's saved the baby that Sue miscarried, which he didn't actually have powers during that time, so there's no way he could have saved this baby. But somehow he saved the baby with Roma's help and held it to the side, and we realized this is actually Sue's daughter who was miscarried for some strange reason. So it's really bad. I'm not a fan of Valeria, I'm sorry to say. But with this, to defeat Abraxas and mess up what's that character? Infinity, he's gonna fix everything back. So he brings back he brings back Galactus, first Galactus, our Galactus, and then some other stuff happens. Infinity breaks apart, and then we see Sue come back, and Sue's pregnant again. And this is kind of my cutoff point for the FF. I think I bought the next issue, but I couldn't really come back to this book because I wasn't a fan of Valeria. They also did stuff where she became this ultimately powerful thing with Mark Waid. And ultimately with the kids, if you're not trying to do regular stories with the kids, instead of you trying to make them into Cable and all this stuff, you're not doing real stories. If you do the characterization first and then you can get to the all-powerful, by all means. But all it is some sort of plot device to do something really nutty that doesn't work as far as the story or characterization. And it makes the FF useless when this happens. And I finally got to the point, I've tried to do this video a couple of times, I never got to that point where you get the Jack and having all this power. So ultimately, if you're trying to do real stories, you're not trying to do this stuff. I think I have, do I have anything else here? So there we go. Ultimately, when you're trying to do your Fantastic Four stories and you have Franklin here and you decide that he's all powerful and he's going to do XYZ, it takes away from the Fantastic Four. Because whenever they get into a jam and they beat up and kick to the floor, all you have to do is have Franklin sit around and lash out and take them out. And it doesn't lead you to do good sort of storylines with them. And I think ultimately, I had almost forgotten about these portions of the story. So it was always good to go back and see. So if you're going to do a Franklin, are you going to do Franklin? And I can't, they would, Reed and Sue would not name their daughter after Dr. Doom's old girlfriend. I guess no connection to Reed and Sue. It's just really a comic book naming of a kid, which was nutty. And this wasn't even another kid that they had. This was the kid that Sue miscarried. So many. It's not comic cliche, but it's just comic. It's just like with like comic book sort of sensibilities, and not in a good way. So ultimately, if you want to do Franklin, to me, I say you do Tattletale. You do this character with limited powers, tons of personality, so much personality that Chris Claremont utilized him for, which I didn't show you. The good moments in Fantastic Four versus the X-Men are the Franklin and who is it? And Kitty Pryde moments where she keeps her from giving up on life, and she holds on. But that also drawn by John Badeno. But that is a real character. If you do your characterization, then you can get to the stuff you want to do. But since you're going to do these kind of nonsense of someone recreating the world so the X-Men can come in, then I say no, Franklin. It's not story related, not character related. You have to do the character first. You can have him already have the kid, but then if you have him being super powerful, what are the FF there for? They're not. They just backdrop to say, hey, here's this guy coming. He's gonna fix everything. Give us the X-Men. Give us all this other stuff, and he's gonna be this cosmic thing that's sitting in there like a reverse Omen, like almost. And that's why Byrne kind of played up the kind of the Christ type look, like the savior type of look of this all-powerful character. So there we go. I did it. Got through my FF storyline, this Franklin thing. I am a big fan of this period in the 80s with Franklin. I am not a fan of what it came before and releasing his deadly powers again. I am not for that. The FF from the first 200 issues, play that up as much as you could do. To go even further beyond that is pointless. So if you're actually a fan of Franklin, or you're a fan of the Marvel Handbook where they tell you how powerful characters are, then you're not here for doing good stories. You're only here to say, how can we get the X-Men? How can we find out where the FF went? Oh, Franklin put them in a pocket universe like he did in Heroes Return. So there we have it. I'm sorry, any of you people acting like you're a fan of Franklin. I don't think he kind of came into his own until this period. So that's just my opinion. But it's the way to disaster